How's it going, folks? People in the back row, can you hear me? I'm not wearing the microphone. Surely I don't have to wear the microphone. Thanks everyone for giving up an hour of your lives to come and hear about honours. Honours is the engine room of science. So for many of you, you're probably just thinking about it as a part of your undergraduate journey, but all of the departments and schools that make up science, and of course, when you do honours in a Bachelor of Science, that could be in one of the 5 schools that is formally in the Faculty of Science. But then, you know, we're in M2 over here. I'm not even sure what happens in this building. This is where the ologies happen. Is that right? Biochemistry, pharmacology, immunology, stuff like that. It's broad. You can do honours in computer science. Can't do it anymore. You used to be able to do it in material science, which is part of engineering. So it's quite broad. But it is the engine room of research. Honours students and PhD students collectively probably do the bulk of the research that comes out of our disciplines. Now, as an honours student, you're probably thinking, well, you know, I've only just finished learning about the science. In fact, I'm still learning about the science. I still have to do more coursework, and of course that's true. But all of the work that happens in the university is nominally comes out of research groups, and research groups is everything from potentially the professor right down to honours students, and sometimes even undergraduate research project students. And many of you will have done sort of XXX 3990 undergraduate research project units. And so everything from what the professor's doing right down to potentially you guys is the engine room of the research that comes out of this university. We're a group of 8 university, yeah, so we're in the top 8 in the country. Actually, we're not 8th, we're much better than that. So we're pretty good. So doing honours is a part of being pretty good, yeah. It's an amazing opportunity for you guys as well, because, you know, the first 3 years of your science education, lots of lectures, a whole bunch of exams, lots of lab reports and assignments and those sorts of things. You know what? When you get a job one day, you'll never attend a lecture in the workplace. Your boss will probably never ask you to sit an exam in the workplace. You'll just be working. And that's what you do in an honours project, is you're just working. You are managing a project. You are managing your time. You are delegating roles across your calendar. You are collaborating with other people and sometimes negotiating difficult conversations. All of the things that happen in a real job. Okay? So while the first 3 years, or however long it's taken you to get to this point, wasn't irrelevant, you're learning lots of cool science, your honours experience is really going to take your education to the next level. I'm not sure if you have a feel for how many students actually do honours. Roughly, it's about 20%. So when you think about it from that perspective, all these students studying science, and then they're going to go out into the workforce, and some of you will be academics and get trapped in the university system, like myself and Jan, who's going to speak after me. But most of you won't stay on in academia. You'll go out into the world and you'll have real jobs. Yeah, real jobs. So the honours experience is, in the first instance, is already going to put you potentially ahead of most of those other 80% of graduates who didn't do the honours here. When you go for those first job interviews, you will have examples to draw on. So I'm really pleased that you've all turned up here today, and I'm not going to speak too much. I'm going to hand it over to an academic from the School of Mathematics, and you're going to hear from some students as well. So that's a bit of an overview, and you can see we've got some students from Earth, Atmosphere and Environment and Chemistry who are going to share their experience with you after we hear from Dr. Jan Bernard, who's from the School of Mathematics, and he's the honours coordinator in that school. And in terms of the mechanics of how honours works, all of our 22 different areas that you can do honours in will have an honours coordinator. So they'll manage all of the honours students that are studying that discipline. Applications and administration, the guy walking out the door, James Elliott, is working in the faculty to help take care of that, and Ange as well. I'm not sure how you guys split that role, but Ange Sullivan and James Elliott as a part of the Student Services team. So what is honours? I think I've given a pretty good introduction already. So the Science Honours program is taken as a separate course. So it's a one-year course that comes on the end of the 3-year Bachelor of Science. There are some students in the mix who will be in the Bachelor of Science Advanced Honours Research degree. So Honours is automatically a part of that 4-year course. So I assume some of you guys are in the room as well. It's offered in most science areas of study listed in the undergraduate handbook. Not quite all of them, but most of them. I think there's 25 majors and there's 22 specialisations you can do in Honours. But if you've completed a major, and some of you an extended major, or you've done 2 majors, you're potentially eligible to do Honours. It consists of advanced coursework, so there are still some lectures as a part of the Honours experience, and maybe some assignments, maybe some exams, but they're not semester-long units typically. They tend to be smaller modules. They're in much smaller groups. I mean, most areas only have anywhere from, sometimes as low as 5, but usually more like 10 to 30 students in that honours cohort. So I know, for example, this year in chemistry, there's about 30 honours students. So you travel through as a group. But of course, it's got a research project component. Now, this is not some contrived project that people have already done. People have done this before, but you guys are just students. We'll give you this project, and you can see if you can come up with the same result that someone else, some experts, have already come up with. This is a project that no one has ever done before. Now, it might be a part of a bigger project that the professor is working on or something like that, but the bit that you'll be doing as an honours student is new. It's unique. Okay, so it is your own little special part of the science universe that you'll be able to take credit for, and many students publish their work. Many students get papers. This is a really important slide. I actually only have, I think, 4 slides, so I don't have much to say. But I think this is a really important slide because it's shifting the conversation. If I was giving this talk 20 years ago, I would be standing here saying, now all you good people that want to do PhDs in science, honours is just a stepping stone to get to that PhD. So those days are over. We've kind of woken up to ourselves a little bit. Many of you will stay on and do PhDs, and of course it is a stepping stone to doing a PhD, but actually statistically less than half of you will do a PhD. So if you're still going to do honours, what's the point? And of course the point is it enhances your employability. So an honours in science is the basic degree expected by many employers for graduates to work as a specialist scientist. In addition to gaining insight into a particular area of science, you'll develop a multitude of skills. And I've mentioned these things already, so it's your own project. So your project management completely comes down to you. And your supervisor will probably tell you what to do at various points in time. But you know what? Every now and then you might even disagree with the boss and say, actually, I don't think we should do that experiment. I think we should do this experiment instead. And that is your prerogative to take ownership over the project. It's an opportunity to see if research is for you. Now, research is not just something that's done in universities. It's done in the R&D sector. It's done in industry. But many of you will go on and do other things. You might go and work for a consultancy firm. You might even go and work in the corporate sector, in banking. Some of you will go on and be secondary teachers. And God knows we need great scientists going on to be secondary teachers in this country. So in my opinion, that's a really honourable pursuit as well. But the last point there, it's a chance to work with some of the leaders, world leaders. Most of our academics can call themselves world leaders in very particular areas of science. It's challenging, absolutely. It's rewarding, and it's a lot of fun. So that's it from me. Can I hand over to Jan, and there will be opportunity to ask questions towards the end of the presentation of all of our speakers today. I can talk about the boring bits, like, what sort of grades do you need to get into the course. But we've invited Jan today as an honours coordinator just to talk a little bit about the experience from his perspective. So I'll hand over to you, mate.
Thank you, Chris. I'll put the microphone on. I think that's... Well, can you hear me like that? Yeah? Is that okay like this, without the microphone? Good. So, I'm the honours coordinator. My name is Jan. I'm the honours coordinator for mathematics. And, coordinator is a big word because I didn't coordinate very well my slides with Chris, because I'm going to repeat a lot of things you already said. The title is very provocative. It's really, coming from a mathematician, saying what, how, and why is highly provocative. And so what does it involve? First of all, is it's not like a regular undergraduate program in the sense that it entails both research and coursework. And it depends, it varies on the split up between the points. So there's 48 credit points total, regardless of which program you're in. But depending on the school in which you will be doing your honors degree, the research might be worth more than the lecture components. In mathematics, as it turns out, it's difficult to do research right away. So this is why we have a stronger emphasis a little bit at the beginning, at least in semester 1, on coursework. So for us, it's 1/3 of 48, so that's 16. That's for your research project or research thesis, as you might want to call it. And then the rest, so 2/3 of 48, that would be 32. That's for lectures. So traditional lectures as you do in second and third year, except it's more advanced. And as Chris was saying, the cohorts are smaller, so you get to interact with the professor in a much closer way. In fact, sometimes there's so few students enrolled in a particular topic, and we strive to give our students the best chance that we will even run a course with 2 students, and it's done more on a one-to-one basis where you meet with a professor, you're given some assignments, some material to read. And again, independence is the important word, is that you're gaining independence as a scientist. Not only are you learning new things more or less on your own with the guidance of a professor, but you're also developing new ideas on your own as well, also with the guidance of a professor. And so what you're judged on in the end is, of course, your performance in these units and on your research work. And there's also an oral presentation that counts for some credit, where you're given the opportunity to actually communicate your results, because it is one thing to have found something, it is another thing to be able to communicate. And this is very important. Think of a well. A well that you couldn't tap into is worthless. So if you can't extract the water out of the well, then your well is no good. Same is with your research. So if you have done very good research, but you're incapable of communicating it, you're incapable of being clear about it, people will not listen to you, because people are busy, they don't have time, and there's a lot of people out there who have a lot of things to say. So if you want to be someone who's listened to and heard, you have to be able to correctly communicate what you have done. And so this is why it's also part of the degree, because we see it as something very important. It's valuable also, by the way, elsewhere. When you present yourself for an interview for a job, a real job in the industry, say, you have to be able to give a sense that you're a reliable person and you're capable of communicating correctly what you have to say. If you're not articulating properly the ideas that you have in mind, if you cannot really sort of put in perspective what your vision for your job is going to be, do you think you'll be really attractive, even if you have super high scores at uni? So it's important also to keep both aspects, not only doing, but also explaining what you've done. Now, the entry requirements, I didn't put it here because I think it changes, varies from school to school. In mathematics, we ask that, 70% in your top 4, 70% average in your top 4 third-year math units. That's enough. And of course, you need to find a project supervisor, and a project and a supervisor. And so this is difficult, obviously, because so we have handbooks with lists of supervisors and with lists of projects. Every school has a handbook. So that's the first place to look into. So let's say you want to do a project like mathematics, let's say. So you go to a mathematics webpage, Monash Math Honors, you find the handbook, you pick it up, or you come see me, I'll give you a copy of the handbook, and you can have a look at the projects that we offer. Now beware that we don't list all possible projects, because there's an infinity of projects. I have like 1 million projects in mind. I'm not going to list them all. So I remain very vague in the handbook. I say I offer projects in differential geometry, partial differential equations in geometry or geometric analysis, and I wait until students come to me and they say, well, can you tell me more? But before I say more, I want the student to tell me more about what they're interested in, what they learned up to now, what they would like to do in the future, what sort of specific interests do they have. Many of them have double degrees, so they want to do math, say, but they don't want to give up on the other major, I mean, not completely on it. So we tailor projects also around the students' needs and the students' preferences as much as possible. It is not always possible because, for example, there was a student a couple of years ago who absolutely wanted to study fractals. There's nobody really at Monash who could have correctly supervised the project on fractals. So we sort of divide something that was in the area off, but it was not exactly what the student wanted, unfortunately. But we do our best, and 99% of the time we come up with a good match. Of course, if you want to know more, you can go to these honors information sessions. I think you have the list in the handouts. So you have to be proactive as well. You know, we don't know who you are. You know, we don't know which of you, I can't tell just from looking at you which one might be potentially interested in mathematics. You have to come tell me. And then we talk. And you should never hesitate to contact potential supervisors by email, in person, go knock on doors, talk to some honor students. You know, gather as much information as you can from as many people as you can, because that will help you choose. You know, educate yourself in what your options are. That's very important, and don't hesitate to do it. People actually like to be pestered by good students. So once you reach the point of honors, you are among the top students. So it is not at all a bother for us to have to talk to you. This is not at all something that bothers us. Quite the opposite. We're very happy to have honors students. So when does it start and how long? Well, typically the honors program is 1 year, so it's 2 semesters. There's part-time options are available in some schools. In mathematics, it is possible to do a part-time honors if for some reason, you know, you're working or you maybe have a family to take care of, and so we can do it over a 2-year period of time. Usually it starts in semester 1, as the bulk of the cohort will enter in semester 1, but we also allow intake in semester 2. That is in mathematics. In most schools, I think, do the same, but some schools, I think, do not allow for semester 2 intake because they have, I think they have all of the lecture units in semester 1 and then research focused in semester 2. So it's difficult to enter in semester 2 and do research before you've done the lectures, so that's why. But in math, it's possible to mix. So what skills will you learn? Well, tons and tons of skills, of course, as Chris mentioned a few of them, but you will have a discipline-specific state-of-the-art research skill. That will be the first thing you will develop. And again, research is not for everybody, so you will know pretty quickly whether it's for you or not. But definitely if you go through, and most people actually do, the attrition rate is very, very low, at least in mathematics. It's very, very low. Most people who enter actually get out with a degree, and they're satisfied with it as far as we know, and they're in fact very satisfied with it because, you know, it's many skills that you learn besides just doing research. More importantly is critical thinking, independence, management of your time, management not necessarily of a team. You're not going to be a team manager, but it's very likely you will be working at least with a supervisor, possibly 2. So in mathematics, we allow co-supervision because we have students in applied mathematics. So you could have a supervisor, you must have a supervisor, let's say, in the School of Math, but a co-supervisor we've had at CSRO. We've had co-supervisors from the Alfred Hospital in South Yarra because it was a project that had to do with analyzing data that came from medical experiments. We've had co-supervision with people from banks, co-supervision with people from other schools as well. So it could be between math and physics, between math and engineering, between math and material science. Everything is possible, at least in mathematics. I'm not saying this just applies to every school. Presentation skills, of course, writing skills. It's difficult to actually write science if you've never really done it. It's not like writing up an assignment. You cannot assume goodwill on the person who will read, you know. The person who will read, you don't know who that is. It is not a professor, but it will be someone who will judge your work. And so you want your work to be as clear as possible. You want your work to be as perfectly articulated and communicated as possible so that the person who reads understands what you're trying to tell them and is capable of making a good judgment of your work. And if you believe deep down that your work is good, you will receive good judgment from people who do not have malice, and most people do not. However, if your work is good but poorly presented, you're going to annoy the reader very quickly. Let me tell you, this happens to me every day. So you get very quickly annoyed, and then pretty soon you don't want to hear anything about that person anymore. This person doesn't know how to communicate a simple idea. So it's important. And this is something that you keep with you for the rest of your life, whether you're going to join academia or not. Because honors doesn't only prepare you for academia, it prepares you for a slew of other careers. So it's, as Chris was saying, it's highly regarded by employers. You become an expert, you know, a young expert, but an expert nonetheless in the field that you will study. Probably the problem that you will study will have been looked at by, I don't know, a few other people around the world, a handful, a few dozens, let's say, who will really be interested in what you've done. You will be part of that very close-knit network of people who have worked on one specific project. Well, you get to work with some of the best scientists, and here at Monash you're pretty lucky because we really have state-of-the-art infrastructure, resources, equipment. So on that front you have nothing to worry about, unless maybe you want to do something super complicated and we don't have equipment for it, but I can't imagine that would be the case. Of course, honors is a prerequisite for postgrad study, I think in most fields, at least in mathematics, that's for sure. Mathematics, that's for sure. We wouldn't take a PhD student from Australia who hasn't done an honors year because it's just not, they're just not ready. You know, the honors year really gives them, I mean, they're in the starting block. You know, they come, they're ready to use. You know, they come to us, they've done their honors year, they're ready to use. So that's great. If they haven't, they're not ready for a PhD. And it's a personal challenge maybe to you as well. Maybe you would like to see how far you can push it. Maybe you really enjoy the field in which you've been learning, and you would like to see whether you'd be capable of actually doing research in that field. And so it could also be a personal challenge. We have many students that do honors really out of I want to say, I mean, this sounds a little cheesy, but out of love for mathematics. They really, really enjoy doing it, and they want to keep learning about it. They want to keep doing it. So it could be also for personal reasons, of course. And this is horrible. No, I'll tell the truth. I'll tell the truth, because I think I know what happened. So these slides, I'm doing this for the first time, but of course there were years and years and years of people doing this before me, and I was given last year's slides. So I ripped off a couple of few things, and I ripped this. Although, truth be told, it said it's rewarding and fun. I added challenging last night. That's uncanny now. I have no explanation for that. And then I saw Chris's slides, and I saw the same sentence, and I thought, I think I know what happened. He must have given this slide to someone or took it from someone. I don't know. Let's say first possibly you gave it to someone who did not cite you correctly. I ripped it from them. I didn't cite them, and of course couldn't have cited you. Yeah, then I saw that, and I thought, I'm going second. So anyway. And all right, so the last thing we'll say about the School of Mathematics, but you already know this, is in the handout. So we have two information sessions. One is at the end of August, where we just present the school and possible projects. The second one is more to discuss the nitty-gritty. I should say one last thing. In mathematics, this is very specific to mathematics, we offer a lot of financial support to our students. And my job is to make sure that we offer optimal conditions for students to do their honors degree. Because it's intense, it's a lot of work. It's good to have a cohort that has a sense of federation. So our students have an office, they're given printing privileges, all sorts of little privileges that we give them. They run their own seminar weekly, they have their own little room where they can do their things. And we also offer financial support. So because some of our students, it really helps them with getting by. And about 70% of our students receive financial support, which goes from $5,000 to full fee tuition waive for the really excellent students. So we do that. And the last thing I should say, I'm actually not going to say, because I didn't put it on the slide, and I'm not going to read an email address. It's ridiculous. It's not an email address. It's an HTTP address of a website called the You see, I'm not going to get into it. So.
If they want to find it, they'll contact you.
They'll contact me.
All right. Thanks. We might do some Q&A towards the end. Let's give their presentations, and then we might do a Q&A, and you can ask questions of Jan or of the students towards the end. Tanvi's up first. And you've got a couple of slides as well. I think Angela's got those ready for you.
No, I've got no slides. I'm just going to go for it.
Okay, cool. Got it. Did you want the mic?
Yes, I'll probably need the mic.
So all you need to do is just click that on your apparel somewhere. So let it go. Just a little click there.
that out.
Can you guys hear me? Is that good? Cool. Thanks, Chris and Angela. My name's Tanvi, and I'm doing my honours year with the School of Earth, Atmosphere, Environment. And this is as part of my my Bachelor of Science Advanced Research degree. I did my extended major in environmental science and a minor in chemistry. And the reason I chose honours was obviously because it was embedded into my degree, but more specifically, for many of the reasons that both Chris and Jan mentioned, I really wanted to get that exposure to the scientific research process. And I think as a scientist, no matter what direction you take your career in, whether it be consultancy or policy advisory, etc., managing a project from start to finish and going through that research process is really important. And you might be thinking of doing, a research by master's or a PhD, and honours really gives you a taste to whether or not you want to actually do that in the future. So that's why I chose honours. In terms of my actual project, I'm looking at the role that coastal wetlands might play in protecting the Great Barrier Reef from agricultural runoff. And my project is a little bit different because I'm actually doing it joint with the arts faculty. So it's got a social research component. So earlier on this year, I actually went up to Queensland and interviewed sugarcane farmers to assess some of their perceptions around policy and the challenges that they face in the industry. And I also collected some of my soil samples from mangroves that I brought back down and analysed. And so that's going to form the ecological part of my thesis, whilst the qualitative data from the interviews will actually form the social side of my thesis. So that's been a really interesting experience because obviously being a full science student, never having done any arts units, it's been a learning curve, but it's been really interesting as well. In terms of coursework, Earth, Atmosphere, Environment does this thing where they get you to do 5 short courses run by an external organisation called the Victorian Institute of Earth and Planetary Sciences, or VEEPS. And the idea is essentially that you choose 5 courses that are somewhat relevant to your discipline. But because mine was a little bit different, I was actually able to enrol into the arts honours coursework, and that formed a chunk of my coursework. I also did a literature review in parallel with the one that I was doing for my thesis, and I presented that within my school, and that formed another chunk of my coursework. And finally, I did one VEEPS course for a week in GIS, which some of you might be familiar with. So that's how EAE does coursework, but every school does something different, which I'm sure you'll get to hear a bit later on. What next? Experiences, my honours experiences. So I think the main thing that I've learnt from honours, so there's 3 things. I'm not going to lie, there will definitely be ups and downs, and things can inevitably go wrong, and there'll be many things that are out of your control. But I think the most important thing is actually just developing that flexibility and adaptability to work around those problems. So my project has definitely taught me how to do that, because you might end up going into the field and realise that you can't take as many samples as you'd hoped for. You might bring those samples back and some of them might not work. So being able to adapt to those changes is all part of the research process, and it's really important to understand that. The second thing is actually being able to conceptualize a project from start to finish. So brainstorming the direction that you might want to take your research into, and then turning that into research questions that you actually want to answer, and then giving that a little bit more momentum and developing some sort of appropriate research methodology that will actually help you answer those questions. And that can include, when you might head out into the field to collect your data, how many samples you'll collect, how you'll collect those samples, how you'll analyze them, and also things like collaborating with people outside of university that might actually help you in your data collection process. So I think that's something that we don't actually get exposed to in undergrad. Even if you've done like a third-year research project, it's not as extensive, and honours really teaches you that. So that's definitely something that I've learned. And finally, just general project management. You really don't have any deadlines until about October, when your whole thesis is due, and then maybe like a presentation somewhere in the middle. So it's really important that you actually manage to make the progress that you had intended to make. And for me, I found it particularly useful to set deadlines for myself. So for example, in the first month, I want to get my literature review done. By the end of May, I want to have all my data collection done. Or by the end of August, I want to have 3 chapters written. So it's really important to make those deadlines and stick to them. Because in a project like this, it's really easy to get lost and feel like you're not making any progress. but it's really important to remember that there's always something you can do. There's always something you can chip away at. Even if it just means reading a paper or 2 papers and making notes, that will ultimately contribute to your final product in one way or another. So there's always something to do, and it's important to keep that resilience throughout that whole year. And finally, I think in terms of how honours has benefited me, honours has really helped me realise my passion for scientific communication, because I've had to integrate these 2 very different disciplines together in a coherent way. And it sort of gets you thinking, we do all of this wonderful, technical scientific research, and it's so important to be able to get that research out into the public realm, so that it's accessible by the community, it's accessible by policymakers, etc. And this experience has definitely allowed that the mobility to occur. So if it's something that sounds like something that you might be interested in, I would definitely recommend it. Even if it means that you end up doing a little bit more extra work and having to reach out to multiple people to have that coordination take place, I would definitely recommend it because it's worth it and it's really rewarding in the end. And finally, in terms of career, right now I work part-time as a consultant at GHD, which some of you might be aware of. We basically do technical advisory for environmental engineering and architectural services, and I'll be starting there full-time next year. So those are my career plans for now. We'll see where that takes me later on. But I think that's a wrap-up from me. If any of you have any questions, I'm more than happy to stay back and have a chat at the end, so feel free to come up to me with your questions. But thanks, and good luck, everyone.
Thank you so much. Oh, do you want to do I'll let you do the slides.
Maybe just click that on. You can probably just hold that up. We'll clip it onto you.
I thought when you said you were going to mention 3 things, you were going to say it's challenging, rewarding and fun. But it was far more sophisticated than that. But, over to you, Lachlan.
Excellent. So my name is Lachlan Bruce and I'm doing my honours in organic chemistry with Phil Chan. And I did a Bachelor of Science, majored in Chem and did minors in International Relations and Pharmacology. So my honours, why did I do honours? So I guess doing my undergrad, I was kind of thought I was going to be doing it forever essentially, and I wasn't really thinking about the next step. And so it was kind of just the next logical progression for me, thinking about whether I wanted to go into academia, and so kind of seeing if research was for me. And so this year for me was kind of having a big think and planning about what was the next step in my career. So in terms of my project, don't worry about the fine details, but I'm looking at the copper catalyzed reaction, and essentially I was looking at finding the best conditions that gave me the best yield. And I was kind of getting some variance and things weren't going my way. And turned out I was getting the side product on the bottom there. And that was actually more synthetically valuable and more important. And it was kind of really exciting because the reaction proceeds at room temperature in air, which was significantly different to how these are currently synthesized. So in terms of my honours experience, I can honestly say I've had a really great time. And I guess one of my major concerns when I was considering about honours was, I'd be thrown in the deep end, I'd have to, do all these things that I've never heard of before. And fortunately for me, I was kind of partnered with an experienced postdoc, and she kind of essentially shadowed me for the first month or 2 until I was confident in doing those experiments myself. And then once I got past that, I really enjoyed the high level of autonomy that honours provides. You make all the decisions yourself, and you really develop your project management and time management skills because the thesis is really kind of creeps up on you. And kind of just a piece of advice, as kind of stated, make sure you speak to a variety of different supervisors because your honours year will be really much better if you enjoy your project and have a supervisor that kind of aligns with your personal values. So I guess what's kind of the next step for me, and depending how the rest of the year goes, PhD is an option, and maybe something completely random, maybe a grad job, or maybe go into the industry. So thanks for listening, and yeah, as stated, I'm sure if you go to any honours student, we'll be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mark. Just click that on something. You can just hold that.
Okay.
Okay, and third and last speaker we have from our students is Hannah.
Okay.
Over to you.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah? Okay. So my name's Hannah Williamson, and I'm currently doing my honours through the School of Earth, Atmosphere and Environment. In my undergraduate, I did an extended major in geosciences and a minor in atmospheric and mathematics. And I didn't start my degree planning to do honours. I made that decision at the end of my third year for a similar reason to what Chris mentioned, to try and get that experience to get a job, which is their experience for a graduate position. And personally for me, I've realised how important that was when going to assessment centres this year. So I went to assessment centre in Brisbane for Rio Tinto, and there were no undergraduates there who only had 3 years experience. Either they had industry experience or they'd done an honours degree or a PhD. So really, to be considered to get to that point, you do need to have at least honours or some experience. Also, when I finished my third year, I didn't really feel like I was ready to be jumping into the workforce, and maybe wasn't mature enough or just wasn't emotionally ready. So I wanted to do another year at university. Also, social environment, still had some friends at uni that I didn't quite want to leave yet, so hanging around for another year was pretty appealing. But yeah, the main reason here was experience for a graduate position. So my project, when I started honours, the project I chose was an industry-supported project, which I knew I wanted to do. I figured it would help me get a job in the long run. And essentially what I'm doing is working with Anglo-American, a mining company, and combining all these data sets here to produce a map of the geology of my field area. And the idea then is to create a forward model or a cross-section across this red line and model the geology as though it was buried and see how the response changes in the geophysical data sets we use. And the idea from doing that is to understand the limitations on these data sets when we're making these interpretations, which will help with industry when targeting mineralisation that's quite deep. So the best part about my fieldwork, my project, is that I get to do fieldwork. So I went to Mount Isa back in May and spent 3 weeks just hiking around the field collecting data, which is a benefit of doing geology. Yeah, so what's involved? Tanvi touched on this a little bit, but for us in EAE, our coursework is worth 30%, and we do those VEEPS courses. So these were the 4 that I chose. The first 2 are week-long intensive courses run at Monash. The third one was a 2-week field trip to New Zealand, where we studied the geology there and travelled around. And the last one was another week-long intensive course, but held at UTAS in Hobart. And then you do your literature review, which is just background research on your project, your seminar, which is a 15-minute talk on your research, and the thesis, which is the final write-up you do at the end of the year. Okay, so how has honours benefited me? Clearly, travel has been a big benefit to me. So I've been to Mount Isa, New Zealand, and Hobart this year. These are just some more photos from New Zealand, just to rub that in a little bit more. Networking. So when I say networking, I don't mean with industry, although that is also a benefit. What I mean is just hanging around at university and talking to PhD students and lecturers. It's sort of practicing talking to people so that when you need help, you can reach out, and all these people are more than happy to help you. Industry experience. Like I said, I chose my project to be an industry project, so I'll get that experience and learn how industry projects are run. I was lucky enough to spend a week in the field with geologists from Anglo, and they got to teach me about that, and I got to learn a little bit more about how they run their programs there. Personal and professional development. Obviously, that's going to come in honours with all this hard work and Tanvi and everyone touched on that. But for me, these are the 3 that I've really noticed in myself. The biggest one probably being public speaking, which, although I don't claim to be that great at it, if you told me I was up here this time last year, I would have told you no way. Social life, so this sort of depends on how you manage your honours project, but for me, I spend 9 to 5 at uni, working on my project, hanging out with others in the honours office, catching up with my other friends. But outside of that, I manage my life just normally, so I don't have my normal social life, I still have my part-time job, and I still play sport. So honours doesn't have to ruin your whole life as I thought it would. I thought I'd have to give up work, give up netball, all this sort of stuff. But no, you can manage, if you manage your time right, you can still have your normal life. And how has honours benefited me? So the biggest benefit that I've had from honours so far is that I have gotten a job. So as I said earlier, I went to an assessment centre in Brisbane. which is for Rio Tinto, and I was actually offered the job from that. And I wholeheartedly believe one of the only reasons I was initially considered was because I did honours. Yeah, so that touches on my future plans as well. I plan to move to Perth next year and work as a graduate geologist for Rio Tinto. But yeah, honours is a really hard year and it's a lot of work, but the opportunities and experience that you get are, you can't beat them. They're really beneficial. And it'll really set you up well for either a career or to go on and do a PhD. That's all.
Well done, mate. Excellent public speaking.
And so, last speaker we've got is James, and he's going to run through some of the nuts and bolts. I think that's a fair way to put it, of doing honours.
Yep.
And you've got some slides there as well.
Yes.
You know where to find those?
I sure do.
All right, good stuff. And actually, just a quick comment from me. I mean, Hannah mentioned public speaking, and it actually strikes me when we give this presentation every year, we always invite 3 students, how good they are at standing at the front of a lecture theatre, which is a pretty intimidating thing to do, and they all smash it. And it's genuinely one of the skills you get from doing honours. Speaking of public speaking, James.
I think I'll be okay
You're
with
all
the
right?
microphone. Yeah, thank you, though.
Over to you.
I've got a bit of a loud voice. Hi, everyone. My name's James. I work for Science Student Services, do a few different things in there, and today helping out doing some honours stuff. Most of the stuff that I'll talk about has already been covered in one way or another, so I'll keep it brief. Here is a list of 22 disciplines you can study in the Science Honours degree. Not all disciplines will start in semester 1 and semester 2, so some disciplines will only commence in semester 1. So always double check just to make sure that your plans are going to work in terms of when you plan to commence. And some of the disciplines will only offer as a full-time basis. So some of them are not offered as a part-time. So you can double check that on our Essential Science Honours Guide on our website. Now, normally best commenced in semester 1, just so you can have access to all of the different disciplines, but you can start mid-year in some of them. You can commence your honours up to 5 years after you've completed your units that you use as the basis for entry into honours. So taking a gap year or heading out and working for a couple of years is completely fine. You can then come back and start an honours project. It is a 1-year full-time program, and in some of them can be taken part-time over 2 years. If you are an international student, however, on an ESOS visa, you will need to study on a full-time basis, as well as those in the advanced degrees in Global Challenges and the Advanced Research course. Prior to commencing honours, you will need to have completed your undergraduate degree completely. So that means all units and all requirements. You don't necessarily have to have attended a graduation ceremony, but you do need to have completed your course requirements. If you do plan on taking a summer unit for your last unit in your undergrad, that is usually fine as long as everything is complete by the time you're ready to go. Sometimes that can cut it a little bit fine with the start date, but we're often pretty flexible with that as long as you come and see us in the office and let us know, just so we can take note. Students who are doing a double degree can take intermission from the other component of their double degree if they're not finished yet. So you don't have to have finished both components before starting. You can take an intermission, or you can take an alternative exit if you don't plan on completing the other component and start honours in science. For students in the 4-year programs with honours embedded, you also, same thing, you will have to complete your stages 1 to 3 prior to commencing honours. This stuff has already been covered, but just to quickly run through it. So students must have a minimum 70% average across the 24 points of level 3 units that are relevant to their chosen honours. In some of the biomed and health type areas, a lot of those units can be interchangeable. So if you're doing something in biochemistry or immunology, for example, you can often use one unit from one of the other disciplines as well. Check the university handbook and honours prerequisite table requirements for the discipline and seek advice from the honours coordinator. So I'm not sure if you've had a look yet, but the science website has an essential science honours guide on there, and it's got all of the honours coordinators and key contacts, as well as the honours prerequisite table as well.
Offers are made by the Faculty of Science and are subject to meeting eligibility requirements and availability of suitable supervision and resources. And in some of the disciplines, unfortunately, a 70% average does not guarantee entry. For example, psychology, and it can be quite competitive for some of those projects. So yeah, if you're unsure about anything, feel free to come and chat to us in the science office and we can give you some more information. All right, if you're considering starting honours in semester 1 next year, you should start maybe making contact with potential supervisors and coordinators during semester 2. That way you give yourself plenty of time to talk to a few different people and get all of your information in order, ready to start. You may be required to also complete an internal school or department project preference form in addition to the online faculty application. If you're applying for projects at the Hudson Institute of Medical Research or the School of Clinical Sciences at Monash Health, you will also need to get approval from Mark Hedger at Hudson or Paul King at Monash Health. Again, we can give you this information at Science Student Services. So, when applying, some things to note. You'll be applying for an undergraduate degree, so when you go on and go to submit your application, there will be a link to graduate courses. So yours is an undergraduate course still. And you will also need to select an honours discipline, which they refer to as a unit set in the application. There will be sections where it asks you to upload a transcript, maybe proof of English requirement, things like that. As a Monash student, you don't need to upload a transcript. We already have all of your information, so that is all good. Any students in a 4-year course with honours embedded, the faculty will actually send you an email with an expression of interest, with a date that we'd like you to hopefully respond by. So keep an eye out for that email. That will be sent out sometime in semester 2, probably more towards the end. But yeah, any questions, feel free to come and ask us. Just on what Jan touched on before, there is a lot of financial assistance, I guess, for students doing honours. So there is a specific honours scholarship worth $6,000. Generally speaking, there are about 25 scholarships available per year for academic achievement and about 30 on a needs basis. This is open to both domestic and international students. Round 1 applications are open now and close midday the 6th of November, and Round 2 applications will open in January next year and close in February just before honours commence. There may also be school or department specific scholarships that students can look at. So check on the school's websites or visit one of the schools in person or get in touch with the honours coordinators and they'll be able to give you some more information. And finally, the information session is being recorded and will be up on the Essential Science Honours Guide, so you can check back to that. And in terms of graduation with your undergraduate and starting honours, you will need to apply to graduate from your undergraduate degree, although you don't necessarily have to attend the ceremony if you don't want to. Of course, there is always a cost with attending a ceremony, so students feel free to pick if you want to attend both. That's completely fine. A lot of students will opt to graduate in absentia from their undergraduate and then attend their honours ceremony, but the choice is completely up to you. The only other thing I would mention is that the official documentation will list your date of ceremony, not the date that you actually finish your studies. So it probably makes sense to have your undergraduate, confirmed prior to starting honours. But yeah, like I said, any more information, come and see us in Science Student Services. And that's everything.
All right, thanks, James.